As of Generation 9, there are 9 unused type combinations in Pokemon. With each gen giving us 7 or 8 new type combinations, it would make sense for the next generation to just fill the rest with new Pokemon or regional forms. So for my Fakemon region Devar, I decided to do exactly that. Hey everyone, Brandon here. With Devar being based on India, Nepal, and parts of the surrounding area, I wanted to have these new type combos be as unique in their concepts as the typings themselves. That being said, nearly half of the type combos are part normal, despite a few already existing Pokemon being perfect fits for some of them, which is especially odd when you consider normal has the second largest population of Pokemon to date. The only things that aren't normal here are the fact that these type combos are still unused, and the fact that you still haven't hit that like button, comment, or subscribed yet. Let's fix both of those things, shall we? There are a couple of these normal type combos we've already discussed in previous videos. For normal rock and normal steel, we have a couple of evolutions to the early root normal types, Stalagpine and Sorolger, based on the Indian crested porcupine and the Indian rhino respectively. To learn even more about them and their base stages, you can check out this video here. Now on to some new things. A kind of unwritten rule I made for myself after my first region, Cornera, was that I was going to make more original Pokemon since Cornera was so regional form heavy. And for these type combos, I had another rule. Whatever type combo I had made a regional form for before, I would try to make a new Pokemon for Devar and vice versa. So last time for normal ice, I had made an original Pokemon. Therefore, I'm going to make a regional form this time. So without further ado, here is Devarian Skiddo, the mountain Pokemon, an ice normal type, who I worked with JJmons on. These Skiddo are highly adapted for the harsh cold weather and steep mountains of the Barpiswar mountain range. They have abandoned their grassy coat in favor of a warmer, fluffier one, and the grass typing along with it. Its ability would very naturally be Fur Coat, helping it resist physical moves, like most fighting type moves are, which it is quad weak to. Actually, 3 of the 4 normal type combos in this video are quad weak to fighting, and might be why Game Freak is hesitant to fill them. But they, like all other Pokemon and their type combos, deserve to exist despite how bad they may be competitively. Anyway, at level 32, Devarian Skiddo evolves into Devarian Gogoat, also the mountain Pokemon. With even more dense fur and an even more adventurous temperament, this Gogoat proudly roams all over its mountainous home without fear of falling, as it is very adept at climbing on even the steepest mountain faces. Unlike its Colossian counterpart, this Gogoat is much more difficult to ride and takes a very skilled handler or trainer to master riding it. Devarian Gogoat and Skiddo are obviously based on general mountain goats, which are known for climbing seemingly impossible cliffs, but they are also based on the very fluffy Himalayan tar. Like other mountain goats, the tar has great mobility and has actually had great success as an invasive species in countries like New Zealand, Argentina, and even the US because of this. The extra styling on this coat also acts as a reference to a very famous kind of goat that gets its name from the Indian subcontinent, the Kashmir goat, whose wool is highly sought after for its use in clothing. This Pokemon is also a reference to the Sherpa people of Nepal, who actually have a genetic predisposition for high altitudes called the super athlete gene. This has led to the profession called a Sherpa, which describes a mountain guide, usually in the context of climbing Mount Everest, for which many used to be a part of the Sherpa community. But there's an important distinction here between the Sherpa people and the profession, as the over-tourism of Mount Everest is something that has become a worse and worse issue as time goes on. Rich people come to climb the mountain, don't show it the respect it deserves, and so we have more and more trash covering it each year, leading to pollution of the water runoff which affects local people. Yet another uncool rich person moment. Devarian Gogoat is actually an ally in mountain conservation, as it is very territorial of the mountains, and will try to headbutt climbers to scare them off. This Frosty Headbutt is actually a new move. This is basically just an Ice-type version of Zen Headbutt, but just like Ice Fang, also has the chance to freeze the target. On to our last normal type combo, we have Normal Bug and yet another regional form. A Pokemon that is often overlooked is the little meek Wimpod. The hulking Golisopod is the star of the show in this line. So just like Magikarp and Feebas, Wimpod is evolved as soon as possible. So instead of abandoning the wimpy elements of Wimpod, why don't we embrace them? With that said, here is Devarian Wimpod in its new split evolution, Thissapod, the hardcover Pokemon, who I worked with Team's Fakemon to create. Both of them are bug normal type and are based on a few things. First off, they are based on silverfish. Despite its name, it's actually a type of wingless insect known for its interesting diet, which I will talk about in a second. This creature comes from the order Zygentoma, but was formerly categorized under the deprecated Thysanura, which is where Thissapod gets part of its name, but that th sound also comes from Thesaurus, because of the silverfish's well-known love of eating books. Wimpod and Thissapod love to consume books as well, but they also consume the knowledge of those books with them. They are literally bookworms. I mean, not totally worms, but worm adjacent. Their coloration is inspired by the steps of the National Library of India found in Kolkata, which apparently had a secret room that was discovered in 2010 that I think could play into this line well. Rather than like in Alola, you could find Wimpod running in and out of wall holes in libraries across Devar. The librarians would task you with a side quest to do pest control on these Pokemon, in the process discovering a secret room with a bunch of Wimpod and a Thissopod holding lectures. Also, Thissopod isn't Golisopod, so it would need its own ability, which I decided to name Checkout, as in checking out a book from the library. This ability has Thissopod automatically switch out of battle if it is affected by a status condition. Leaving behind the normal types but staying with bugs, we have the infamous Bug Dragon type. This combo has had many opportunities to premiere already, with the most egregious in my book being Slitherwing. Like, look at this thing, it is literally a draconic dinosaur bug and you cannot convince me otherwise. But I cooked something up for this type combo that I think works incredibly well. So allow me to introduce Flymera, the Amalgam Pokemon, that I worked with JJ Mons on as well. As its name and category imply, this Pokemon is a mixture of things. The wings of a dragonfly, the eyes of a fly, the fluffy mane of a moth, the mandibles of a bee, the front legs of a locust, which are actually the back legs but we switched them to the front, the actual back legs of an ant, and the tail of a scorpion. This multi-part mixture refers to a creature from Hinduism called the Navagunjara, a mythical creature composed of 9 different animals. While we couldn't quite make 9 different insects work in one Pokemon, I think 7 is decently close. But the way these insects are combined also refers to another chimeric creature that hails from India, but is actually from Persian and Greek mythology, the Manticore. A mixture of man, lion, scorpion, and sometimes a bat. Anticore was also in the running to be this thing's name, but Flymera was way more clever in my opinion. Flymera are highly adaptable creatures due to the variety of their physical features. They can thrive in almost all environments except cold ones. Their signature ability, Chimeric, plays into this, giving them a boost in different stats depending on if there is a terrain out. Grassy terrain boosts HP, electric terrain boosts speed, misty terrain boosts special defense, and psychic terrain boosts special attack. And speaking of special, we move on to a super unique type combo, Ice Poison. With such an unusual pairing of types, it is deserving of an unusual inspiration. So let's take a look at this tree. Pretty unassuming, right? Well, this tree is hiding a secret. A deep, dark, deadly secret. This little fruit here. This tree is called the Strychnos nux vomica, also known as the strychnine or poison fruit tree. This fruit contains a special kind of toxin called strychnine that if consumed has some very deadly effects such as muscle spasms that lead to a fever. This form of poison was actually a favorite of writer Agatha Christie and was used in the murder of a few characters across her many books. The inside of the strychnine fruit and the powdered version are both white and crystalline, just like snow and ice. On top of that, the strychnine tree blooms in winter. And remember how I said the poison can give you a fever? You know, the thing infamous for making you feel cold? These inspirations all culminate in our ice poison types, Albinux, the chilling Pokemon, and Xenux, the fatal Pokemon. Albinux is a joyous little fruit-like Pokemon, evoking Pokemon like Bounsweet and Cherubi, even though it isn't a grass type. I also used Lumas from Super Mario Galaxy as an inspiration for the body shape. Xenux, on the other hand, is full-on flower-based, much the same as the Glamora line that looked like a flower despite being rock poison type. And it certainly isn't like your other flower waifus. It may look all cute and innocent, but this Pokemon is a fatale. The literary trope of an attractive or seductive person who lures you in with their good looks before stabbing you in the back, both figuratively and literally. Specifically, the Diana version of this trope, dressed in white to look saintly and innocent. While Agatha Christie didn't really use this trope, that literary inspiration is meant to reference her use of strychnine. Albinux and Xenux are usually found at the base of the Barpiswar mountain range. Xenux will lure prey with an alluring smell that their petals can give off. When the prey is close enough, Xenux will freeze it solid and then inject it with poison. This line also sort of acts as a counterpart to the Padmaya line I previously introduced, with their typings as well as their personalities being complete inverses of each other. Albinux's name comes from albinism, the conditional absence of melanin making every part of the body colorless or white. And Nux, coming from its inspiration, the Strychnos nux vomica. Xenux's name comes from Frozen or Zenith and Nux. So if it's a counterpart, why wasn't it in the counterparts video last month? Because I wanted to save it for this one, silly. The same can be said about our next entry, which is also an inverse of types from our last combo, Fire Fairy. One of the best things I find to do when making a fairy type is to look to fairy tales. And there just so happens to be a Sanskrit one that I found to be a great inspiration for a Pokemon. The legend is of a beautiful woman who agreed to marry a king on one condition, that he never show her a single drop of water. Of course, one day he did, and she immediately sank out of sight, just as the sunset sinks into the sea, transforming her into a frog named Bakey. So with that said, allow me to introduce Tadcole, the Firetail Pokemon, a pure fire type, and Bakroak, the Sunfrog Pokemon, a fire fairy type, who I worked with Fungusmon to bring to life. We have had a grass frog Pokemon and several water frog Pokemon, so with this we finally get a fire frog Pokemon. This line, especially Baycroak, takes inspiration from the Indian bullfrog, which males sport this bright yellow and blue coloration during the mating season. If you had the thought, gee, Baycroak sure looks a lot like Politoed, you would be absolutely correct, and that was intentional. Politoed across its many dex entries is known as the king of Poliwag and Poliwhirl, so Baycroak is the queen to its king, just like Bakey formerly was a queen. Politoed is known for using Rain Dance, and so Baycroak would of course learn Sunny Day. Speaking of sun, you can see the little suns across Baycroak's design, as well as what looks like sunlight coming from its mouth to fully lean into its category and inspiration. On to yet another fairy type and the pseudo-legendary of the Devar region. I very much wanted to break from the dragon-type pseudo pattern, as we have had two very solid examples of what that can look like in the past, and I've done it before with Cornera, so I wanted to continue that trend. The Garo people of India have within their folklore a creature of terrifying size and strength, the Wakmanganchi Aragondi. A primordial demon pig as tall as a mountain with 7 heads, lined with tusks as sharp as a scimitar. Well, that sounds quite ferocious. Why a fairy type? Well, this creature wasn't always this way. In fact, the 3 uncles of the hero who eventually slayed this beast brought it home as a pet who stayed in a sty made of stone. 3 brothers and a pig who lives in a house made of stone. Why does that sound so familiar? Oh, I got it. So here is Walkstock, the piglet Pokemon, a ground fairy type, who I also worked with JJmons to create. This little oinker represents the Wakmanganchi's adorably innocent origins, like many pseudo-lines and Pokemon in general, who start off as cute and cuddly creatures before transforming into behemoths of mass destruction. It also represents the first little pig who built its house out of straw, with Walkstock's hair and tail looking like said straw. Its name comes from Wak, which means pig in Garo, and stack, as in a haystack. At level 35, Walkstock evolves into Wak, the doublet Pokemon. You know what they say, 2 heads are better than 1, and Pokemon seems to agree. If we can have multiple dragon flying type pseudos, I think we can have multiple multi-headed pseudos too, alright? With this second head, we also get the second little pig who made their home out of sticks, shown by the more spiky or stick-y hair. You may have noticed a few other details also multiplied with this design. As we've established, Wak means pig in Garo, so its name is literally just Pig, which is so funny to me, but works given it is 2 pigs put together. You could also work in the idea of whack, as in like whacking someone with a stick. Look, I know it's a stretch, just go with it. Finally, at level 45, Wak evolves into Wakpok, the triplet Pokemon. You know what they say, 3 heads are better than 2. Pokemon also seems to agree with that. Could you scooch over him a little bit? Anyway, Wakpok is an absolute beast whose stomping tantrum is unmatched. And absolutely this monstrosity is physically bulky. The final little pig is brought into this design with the middle head which has a more blocky hair like the bricks that the final house was made of. But also kind of looks like a pineapple. Now I'm hungry. You know who else is? Wakpok, who is constantly eating with those 3 mouths lined with razor-sharp tusks. It will eat anything, much like pigs who are not picky about what they eat. As such, Wakpok would have the ability Earth Eater, and a new hidden ability called Iron Eater, which works just like Earth Eater but for steel types. Is that broken for a ground fairy type? Maybe, but I don't really care. Wakpok's name comes from Wak and Pack, as in a group of something. And finally, for the Ghost Rock type, we won't be discussing it quite yet, which I know is a bit of a bummer, but it's for a good reason. It is because that type is held by the main legendary for one of 2 DLC expansions coming to the Devar region, that we will be diving into in a future video. And with that, we have introduced every Pokemon in the base version of the Devar region. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.